2 Chronicles 10. Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all of Israel had come to Shechem to make him king. When Jeroboam son of Nebat heard this while he was in Egypt, where he had fled from before King Solomon, Jeroboam returned from Egypt, for the people sent for him and summoned him. Jeroboam came, along with all of Israel, and they spoke to Rehoboam, saying, "Your father made our yoke of taxation difficult. Now, you alleviate your father's difficult workload and this heavy yoke that he placed upon us, and we will serve you." He said to them, "Go away for 3 more days and then come back to me." So the people left. King Rehoboam took counsel with the elders who had stood before his father Solomon while he was alive, saying, "How would you advise what word to respond to this people?" They spoke to him, saying, "If you are good to this people and show them favor and speak kind words to them, they will be your servants all the days." But he ignored the advice of the elders who had counseled him, and he took counsel with the youths who had grown up with him, who ministered before him. He said to them, "What word would you advise? What word shall we respond to this people who have spoken to me, saying, 'Alleviate the yoke that your father placed upon us'?" The young men who had grown up with him spoke with him, saying, "This is what you should say to the people who have spoken to you, saying, 'Your father made our yoke heavy, you alleviate it for us.' This is what you should say to them. 'My little finger is thicker than my father's loins. So now, my father saddled you with a heavy yoke. I shall add to your yoke. My father chastised you with sticks, and I with scorpions." Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam on the 3rd day, as the king had spoken, saying, "Return to me on the 3rd day." The king responded harshly to them. King Rehoboam ignored the advice of the elders. He spoke to them according to the counsel of the youths, saying, "I shall make your yoke heavy, and I shall add to it. My father chastised you with sticks, and I with scorpions." The king did not listen to the people, for it was caused from God, in order that Hashem should fulfill his word that he had spoken through the hand of Ahijah the Shilonite to Jeroboam, son of Nebat. All of Israel saw that the king did not listen to them, and the people responded to the king, saying, "What share have we in the house of David? We have no heritage in the son of Jesse. Back to your homes, O Israel. Now see to your own house, O kingdom of David." All the men of Israel left for home. As for the children of Israel who lived in the cities of Judah, Rehoboam ruled over them. King Rehoboam dispatched Hadoram, who was in charge of the tax. And the children of Israel pelted him with stones, and he died. King Rehoboam then hastened to mount his chariot to flee to Jerusalem. Thus Israel rebelled against the house of David to this day. 2 Chronicles 11. Rehoboam came to Jerusalem and gathered together the house of Judah and Benjamin, 180,000 choice warriors, to fight against the house of Israel, to return the kingdom to Rehoboam. The word of Hashem then came to Shemaiah, the man of God, saying, "Speak to Rehoboam, son of Solomon, king of Judah, and to all of Israel in Judah and Benjamin, saying, Thus said Hashem, do not go up and fight with your brethren. Let each man return to his home, for this matter was brought about by me." They obeyed the words of Hashem and returned back from going to fight Jeroboam. Rehoboam remained in Jerusalem. He built up cities for defense in Judah. He built up Bethlehem, Etam, Tekoa, Beth-zur, Soko, Adullam, Gath, Marashah, Ziph, Adoraim, Lachish, Asekah, Sora, Aijalon, and Hebron, which are in Judah and Benjamin, as fortified cities. He strengthened the fortified cities, and in them he placed rulers and storehouses of food, oil, and wine. In each city he stored shields and spears, and he fortified them very greatly. Thus Judah and Benjamin remained his. The Kohanim and Levites throughout Israel presented themselves to Rehoboam from all of their territories, for the Levites had abandoned their outlying areas and their property and went to Judah and Jerusalem, because Jeroboam and his sons had dismissed them from ministering to Hashem. For he had established priests for himself for the high places, and demons and calves that he had made. After them, people from all the tribes of Israel who had dedicated their hearts to seek out Hashem, the God of Israel, came to Jerusalem to bring offerings to Hashem, the God of their fathers. They strengthened the kingdom of Judah And they bolstered Rehoboam son of Solomon for 3 years, for they followed the path of David and Solomon for 3 years. Rehoboam took Mahalath, daughter of Jeremoth son of David, for a wife, as well as Abihail, daughter of Eliab son of Jesse. She bore him sons, Jeush, Shemariah, and Saham. After her he took Maacah, daughter of Absalom, who bore him Abijah, Attai, Sisa, and Shelomith. Rehoboam loved Maacah, daughter of Absalom, more than his other wives and concubines, for he had married 18 wives and 60 concubines, and he begot 28 sons and 60 daughters. So Rehoboam made Abijah, son of Maacah, as head, to be the ruler of his brothers, in order to make him king. He had insight, and he dispersed some of his sons throughout all the lands of Judah and Benjamin, to all the fortified cities. He gave them abundant supplies of food and sought out many wives. 2 Chronicles 12. It happened that as Rehoboam's kingdom became established and he became strong, he forsook the Torah of Hashem and all Israel with him. It was in King Rehoboam's 5th year that Shishak, king of Egypt, ascended against Jerusalem, because they had betrayed Hashem, with 1,200 chariots and 60,000 horsemen, and countless people who came with him from Egypt, Lubim, Sukkim, and Ethiopians. He captured Judah's fortified cities, and he approached up to Jerusalem. Shemaiah the prophet came to Rehoboam and the officers of Judah who had gathered together in Jerusalem because of Shishak, and he said to them, "Thus said Hashem, you have abandoned me, so I too have abandoned you into the hands of Shishak." The officers of Israel and the king thereupon humbled themselves, and they said, "Hashem is the righteous one." When Hashem saw that they had humbled themselves, the word of Hashem came to Shemaiah, saying, "They have humbled themselves. I will not destroy them. I will grant them a small portion as a remnant, and my wrath will not be poured out upon Jerusalem through Shishak. Rather, they will become slaves to him, and they will recognize the difference between serving me and serving the kingdoms of the lands." When Shishak had ascended against Jerusalem, he took away the treasures of the temple of Hashem and the treasures of the king's palace. He took everything. He also took the golden shields that Solomon had made. King Rehoboam made copper shields in their place, and he placed them in the charge of the captains of the runners, who guarded the entrance to the king's palace. And it would be that whenever the king would come to the temple of Hashem, the runners would come and bear them and then return them to the chamber of the runners. But when he humbled himself, the anger of Hashem turned back from him, not destroying Judah completely. Furthermore, in Judah, things went well. King Rehoboam strengthened himself in Jerusalem and reigned. For Rehoboam was 41 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 17 years in Jerusalem, the city that Hashem chose in which to place his name, out of all the tribes of Israel. His mother's name was Naamah the Ammonite. He did evil, for he did not set his heart to seek out Hashem. The earlier and later events of Rehoboam, behold, they are written in the words of Shemaiah the prophet and Iddo the seer, with the genealogy. The wars between Rehoboam and Jeroboam were constant. Rehoboam lay with his forefathers and was buried in the city of David. His son Abijah reigned in his place. 2 Chronicles 13. In the 18th year of the reign of King Jeroboam, Abijah became king over Judah. He reigned in Jerusalem for 3 years. His mother's name was Micaiah, daughter of Uriel of Gibeah. There was a war between Abijah and Jeroboam. Abijah led the battle with an army of mighty fighters, 400,000 chosen men, and Jeroboam set himself for war against him with 800,000 chosen men, mighty warriors. Abijah stood up on top of Mount Zemaraim, which is in the hills of Ephraim, and he said, "Hear me, Jeroboam, and all of Israel. Surely you should know that Hashem, God of Israel, gave kingship over Israel to David forever, to him and his children for an everlasting covenant. But Jeroboam, son of Nebat, a slave of Solomon, son of David, got up and rebelled against his master. Worthless, lawless people gathered around him, and they set themselves resolutely against Rehoboam, son of Solomon, when Rehoboam was young and weak-hearted, and did not stand up firmly against them. And now you intend to stand defiantly before the kingdom of Hashem that is in the hands of David's descendants. You are a great multitude, and with you are the golden calves that Jeroboam has made for you as gods. Have you not dismissed the Kohanim of Hashem, the sons of Aaron, and the Levites, and made for yourselves priests like the nations of the land? Anyone who comes forward to initiate himself with a young bull and 7 rams becomes a priest to the non-God. But as for us, Hashem is our God, and we have not forsaken him. The priests who minister to Hashem are the sons of Aaron, and the Levites do their work. They burn burnt offerings to Hashem every morning and every evening, as well as an incense of spices. And there is an array of bread upon the pure table, and a golden candelabrum and its lamps to kindle every evening. For we observe the charge of Hashem, our God, while you have forsaken him. Behold, with us, at our head, are God and his Kohanim, and the blasting trumpets to blast against you, children of Israel. Do not wage war against Hashem, the God of your forefathers, for you will not succeed. Meanwhile, Jeroboam had moved an ambush party around to approach from their rear, so that they were in front of Judah, and the ambush was behind them. Judah turned around, and behold, the battle was in front and in the rear. They cried out to Hashem, while the Kohanim sounded the trumpets. The men of Judah shouted, and it happened that as the men of Judah shouted, God struck Jeroboam and all of Israel before Abijah and Judah. The children of Israel fled before Judah, and God delivered them into their hand. Abijah and his people inflicted a very great blow against them, and 500,000 chosen men of Israel fell slain. The children of Israel became humbled at that time, and the people of Judah gained strength, for they relied on Hashem, the God of their fathers. Abijah pursued Jeroboam, and he captured several cities from him: Bethel and its villages, Jeshanah and its villages, and Ephraim and its villages. Jeroboam did not again muster strength in the days of Abijah. Hashem struck him, and he died. Abijah established himself. He married 14 wives, begetting 22 sons and 16 daughters. The rest of the deeds of Abijah and his ways and records are written in the narration of the prophet Iddo. Abijah lay with his forefathers, and they buried him in the city of David. Asa his son reigned in his place. In his days, the land was tranquil for 10 years. 2 Chronicles 14. Asa did what was good and proper in the eyes of Hashem his God. He removed the alien altars and the high places, shattered the idolatrous pillars, and cut down the Asherah trees. He told Judah to seek Hashem, the God of their forefathers, and to observe the Torah and the commandments. He removed the high places and sun images from all the cities of Judah, and the kingdom was tranquil before him. He built fortified cities in Judah, for the land was tranquil, and he had no wars during these years, for Hashem had granted him rest. He said to Judah, "Let us build up these cities and surround them with walls and towers, double doors and bolts. The land is still before us because we have sought out Hashem, our God. We have sought him out, and he has granted us rest all around." So they built, and they succeeded. Asa had an army bearing shield and spear. From Judah 300,000, and from Benjamin 280,000, who bore bucklers and drew bows. All these were mighty warriors. Sarah the Ethiopian went out to war against them with an army of 1,000,000 men and 300 chariots, approaching up to Mareshah. Asa went out before him. They arrayed themselves for war in the valley of Zephath, near Mareshah. Asa called out to Hashem, his God, saying, "Hashem, there is none besides you to help in battle between the many and those with no strength. Help us, Hashem, our God, for we depend on you, and we have come in your name against this great multitude. You are Hashem, our God. Let no human muster strength against you." Hashem struck the Ethiopians before Asa and before Judah, and the Ethiopians fled. Asa and the people with him pursued them to Gerar, and the Ethiopians fell for lack of vitality, for they were crushed before Hashem and before his camp. They carried off very much booty. They struck all the cities around Gerar, for the dread of Hashem was upon them, and they plundered all the cities, for there was much plunder in them. They also struck tents of livestock and captured sheep in abundance and camels, and then they returned to Jerusalem.